What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Blind Live. And we have Ryan and Ari from Three Chord Bourbon with us. And if you don't know Three Chord Bourbon, you definitely should. And these guys are going to tell you all about it, I'm sure. Real quick, getting off the bat, we are drinking the 12-year Three Chord Bourbon. And it's freaking fantastic. It is barrel proof at 107 proof. So batch number 7 for you geeks out there.
And the flavor on it doesn't drink like a 107. I love this.
Yeah, tons of flavor. Love it.
So you're in Nashville, right?
About an hour south of Nashville.
So the Middle Tennessee area got they were the first to get the batch 7, which is the one that just got 94 points from Whiskey Advocate. Just last week's issue, the summer issue, and it immediately sold out. And there's some more coming into the market. So I'm excited about that.
Well, we definitely appreciate being able to get it here. And you guys are in Tennessee, right? Over on the
west side. I'm out in Memphis, and so I'm selling across the state, and Ari's up in Michigan.
Awesome.
That's right. So, yeah, I'm in Michigan. I'm down in Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana. Well, I used to go more frequently than I do now. But we go down there and we find really interesting lots of whiskey, 20 to 70 barrels at a time, really.
Nice.
And enough to be interesting and substantial, and we can create batches that can have their own personalities go out into the world, like Ryan was saying.
So when you guys create batches, are you looking to just make the best batch from each one, or are you trying to like shoot for a certain flavor profile, or how do you walk us through that process a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, right? Because maybe you go into a blending session, which can take 6 weeks to do if you're dealing with a large amount of barrels, because you really want to know the barrels well and which barrels go in which blend. And at the end of the day, you might go in there with a preconceived notion. You might go in there with a quantity that you're looking to produce. But what ends up happening is the barrels, if you keep on revisiting them, different times of the day, drink them with different glasses, and you systematically go through them, tracking notes, sort of themes will pop out at you, and you'll figure that, okay, there's different themes in this lot of barrels, and you can express it in different ways. So then what we do is then we start to make little micro scale trials, right? So we start doing really small micro blends and tasting those over a while. And if you keep on revisiting, the barrels will tell you how big the blend should be and which casks should be in it.
That's awesome.
And then one thing that I've learned just working with Ari is definitely a chemist. He's the guy that knows how to go in and compare every detail of the batches to make sure that we're getting really consistent batches, which is nice. Just for me when I was a retailer, going to a bunch of distilleries, meeting a bunch of master distillers, they run the gamut from old guys that just say, I put it into the barrel and the magic happens. And then you've got, at like Heaven Hill, where it's, a factory and it's just computers everywhere. And the master distiller is a guy that you probably never heard of, and he's back there on a computer, and Ari is somewhere in between, which I've really appreciated. He kind of understands both sides, which I like.
That's awesome. And one thing that always impresses me is blending is such an art. And it's not, I'm sure there's science that goes into it, but 2 + 2 does not always equal 4. Yeah. Actually, I found out 2 + 2 rarely equals 4.
Not everything goes as well together as peanut butter and jelly.
Right.
Not everything can be greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. Like, I went through culinary school, and I love cooking, and, I'm one of those people that I don't measure anything, and I just want this much of this, and I taste it, and this much of this, and I taste it. But with cooking, you kind of know if I add basil to this, I know what basil tastes like. I know what this tastes like. I can see what those taste like together. Bourbon, it does not work that way.
Bourbon's more like baking.
Right. Bourbon's more like baking. Like it's
right.
Magic.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And something interesting is Ari and I both, I think, learned about blending more on the wine side and started blending wine before blending bourbon.
That's
and
pretty crazy.
That was definitely where I learned 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4.
Right.
And, it was fascinating going through blending sessions on the wine side and just seeing how you think that you can know what adding 5% of Merlot is going to do to it, but honestly, and the smallest differences make such a huge effect on everything. I mean,
right.
I remember doing a 0.5% change of a varietal, and it was a huge difference. It was crazy.
Good tip. I needed to know that.
Cocktails as well. So the bartenders will know this very well, that if you don't hit your proportions exactly, or if you don't shake it the right number of times, you get too much dilution or not enough dilution of your ice, you're going to have a very different cocktail than you would otherwise have. And Kyle, to your point, yeah, I think that blending, certainly within the distilling context, we'd love to see consistent, when you're a distiller, you'd love to see consistent inputs, consistent grains come in.
Right.
Make sure that your yeast are healthy and if you're propagating your own yeast culture, that you have means of ensuring that it's stable over time.
Yeah.
But really the distilling part of it should be sort of a science that's totally replicable, right? You have the same ingredients coming in, you mash them at the same temperatures. Hopefully your still works the same each and every time because it's fed with the right amount of steam, right? You have the right amount of steam pressure, right temperatures, you're making the cuts at the right time. Up until that point, everything should, in a perfect world, be the same every single time.
And somehow it's not.
Right, it's a technician's role. And when you're good, you think you're going to get up to a certain specific gravity in your mash before you pitch your yeast into it. And if you're good, you could hit those same numbers over and over again like clockwork. And then the product goes in the barrel. And like you said, with baking, like the magic starts or the variables kick in.
Right.
And so, hopefully everything that goes in the barrel, because it's been done the same way each and every time, and there's very little artistic about that production process. It's kind of like building widgets, or where I'm from outside Detroit, it's like building cars. It should be the same every time. Like you don't want the guy working on the line in the factory to be like, I think I'm going to put the lug nut in this other way. Blending is where perspective and approach comes in and helps define what a product is. And I think one thing that we do a lot at Three Chord is we use the blending approaches that have sort of developed over a very long time in other places in the world. There's a strong tradition of blending, obviously, in Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Where you blend really top-notch ingredients. In America, when you hear blended, oftentimes you're thinking people are mixing vodka or neutral spirit into a really great product to extend it, to drive down the cost, and maybe to dilute the product, right?
Yeah.
That's what blended oftentimes means here, but in Ireland, in Scotland, certainly in Cognac, in Armagnac even, there's all these small producers, and then there's larger blending houses. And those larger blending houses have house styles, and those house styles, pardon me, depend on great spirits coming from different distilleries. Yeah. And then they're blended, they're remarried, and in casks, you choose whatever cask you want. And we do a lot of that at Three Chord. We are very proudly sourcing amazing whiskey from Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, properly aged whiskey, properly produced whiskey, and then doing our own spin on it.
which I think is really, really awesome. And I mean, I don't know if you guys do you have plans to distill your own, or are you guys happy doing what you're doing?
We're very happy doing what we're doing. We do have plans for some interesting things, but they're not going to be ready for quite a while.
Right.
And we have some pretty interesting mash bills and yeast strains in the whiskey that we do have. And we love distilling. This project in particular is really about blending and finding harmonies from different whiskeys. And obviously most whiskey in America is produced by a single producer, right? Most brands represent the spirit of a single producer.
Right.
So one of the things that got our whole project started was making these really interesting bourbon blends with bourbons that we love, that we had behind our home bar. And if you start blending those whiskey bourbons from different states with different mash bills, different yeast strains, aged for different amounts of time, some are more grain forward, some are more wood dominated. Some of those whiskeys, like Indiana and Kentucky, go into the cask at a much higher proof, oftentimes than the whiskey does in Tennessee.
Right.
So hopefully we're able to achieve something that's kind of like unique and compelling and complex by incorporating spirits from different manufacturers.
And go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say one thing that really attracted me to join the Three Chord team was this whole concept of blending to create something unique. It was something I've been fascinated with for a while, and just reading about things like the California Gold over at the Whiskey House, or just things like that, or just people making their own infinity bottles where you're blending things together. And I loved the concept of a company that's taking already good juice from different places and creating something unique, because every distillery puts out something that is their own. It's their unique flavor profile that what it is when you have it. But like you said, 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4. So
right,
you're taking something from Kentucky and something from Tennessee, and you think you know what those parts are. Well, when you put them together, it's totally different, which is great.
Yeah, I've been messing around with blending for a little while now. Spoiler alert, trying to come out with some sort of Bourbon Blind Nation kind of blend.
Awesome.
And I took some Kentucky whiskey and some light whiskey from Indiana. It was a freaking disaster. I was like, ooh, these are like nice and spicy, and this has got like that sweetness in it, and that sweet and spicy. No.
Seems like you're good, right?
How'd you do it? What was it? Did you have a technique? Did you have a way that you were doing it?
As far as
in glass, or
just mixing in the glass. I found 2 that went together really well. They're both from Kentucky, so I ended up mixing a bottle of each together. I put them in the blender on low for a little bit, just to try and get that aeration and everything right. Because, I've done some blending before, like when I started an infinity bottle, right? I went and took 15 whiskeys and put them in there that I think would go together, and you taste it, and it tastes like 15 whiskeys in a glass. You know what I mean? Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. But, and then 2 weeks later, I would try it, and everything started melding together and getting a little more cohesive. And then another week or two, everything kind of started really, harmonizing. Where, so yeah, I don't know if the blender trick works or not, but I've heard stories of it working, so I tried it, but
I think it helped to speed up the process
of
the melding, but I don't know if that was the correct technique. So
one thing that I love to do, so the tools of the trade are pretty basic, right? For a blender, it's like a graduated cylinder, right? Like a glass cylinder that has 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 milliliters, right? And if you go to a homebrew store and spend $10 on a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder, one of the fun things you can do is, if you keep a notebook on tasting notes, or even if you just keep a piece of some Post-its around, is you can start by making a very accurate 50-50 blend,
Right.
And then you can turn that 50-50 blend into a 25-75 and a 75-25. Right. So now now you have 3 blends, right? A 50-50 and then 25-75 on each side. And then you can figure out which one of those you like the most.
Gotcha.
And then sort of narrow it down further.
Kind of use that as a starting point.
Just to use it as a starting point, because it sort of gives it some objective, reproducible thing.
Right.
So it's I encourage people all the time, just get a graduate if you feel like blending. And what we say as distillers is a lot of us came from either the winemaking side or the brewing side, where we ferment something and whatever we ferment is the final product. And then we say that, whiskey begins where beer ends, right? You make beer, that's the end of beer, but that's the beginning of whiskey. That's the start of the distilling process. Blending is like the next thing, right? Blending begins where maturation of that spirit ends. When it ends, then you get out the graduated cylinder and you can say, okay, maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 barrels that you taste through, you say, this is either so interesting by itself, or it's like so perfect, like don't adulterate it with anything else. But the great majority of barrels, I think that folks taste, could be improved upon in one way or another, just with a hint of this or a hint of that, or
right.
Maybe the finish is great, but the mid palate's a little weak. You want to bolster the mid palate or change the viscosity or whatever seems right. And so, just like distillers say, distilling starts where whiskey ends. Blending starts where the distilling ends. And the great thing is, with all of these products available on the market, it's great to make an infinity bottle with 15 different whiskeys and 1 ounce of each, and that's cool. That's great.
Right.
But you can be like really participatory in the whole thing and kind of figure out what style works for you. And at the end of the day, if you just want to have fun at home, I wouldn't even necessarily limit yourself just to one category of spirit.
No.
Add a little bit of Islay Scotch in it, if that's what you care to do.
Right.
You can be very creative. There it is. Or you can have a little Pedro Jimenez in it.
Maybe that's why I drink wine and whiskey together all the time. Usually I have a glass of wine in one hand and my whiskey or bourbon in another, and I sit back and do this number all night long. So
you'll be excited about one of our new products we have coming.
So speaking of that, let's get back to Three Chord. We didn't even say, what are you guys drinking on right now?
I've got a single barrel Three Chord. It's Caesars in Memphis. It's a 13-year-old pit they did, and
awesome.
It's really good.
And I am drinking 2 different whiskeys. I'm drinking a Three Chord blended bourbon, which is 100% blended bourbon. A blend of bourbons from 3 different states. This particular one, we aged in a cask that we had the Independent Stave Company, which is one of our cooperages that we work with.
Yeah.
They made a special cask for us that has toasted French oak heads.
All right.
And the staves are all char level 3 American oak.
Nice.
And so,
that sounds awesome.
So that's actually really close. And I'll go ahead and put this out there. One thing I've thought about for a while, and I have no clue if it would even work, but using like white oak staves mixed with like a third of French oak staves, which is essentially what you did.
Yeah.
That's something that is always like, I've been thinking about that for a couple years, and I'm like, man, that would be so cool. Cause like French oak is really awesome, but it can get really overpowering. You know what I mean? So having that mixture of not having to be all in on it, like that's freaking awesome to me.
It's great. Yeah.
Like,
you have to taste it very regularly. And the risk there is that the American oak and the French oak will extract at different rates, right? So you really have to continually go back to it. You don't want over extraction,
right?
One versus the other, and then it falls out of harmony with itself.
Ryan, Linux Cat, which is Donnie and Diana.
Yeah, I just realized that I could see the chat over here. I had it flipped on the wrong thing. So
okay, gotcha.
Donnie and Tarek in here.
Yeah, Tarek's in here.
Tarek's in here.
Yep, he's been. He said hi. So anyway, he wanted to know if they still have any of that 13-year that you know of.
I believe so.
Is that a liquor store in Memphis? I take it? Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty large store just outside of Memphis.
I was trying to think. My first thing went to like a Caesar's Palace in Vegas. Yeah. I was like, do they have a hotel in Memphis?
No, it's a big liquor store in Memphis that has a giant Captain Morgan statue on the roof. It's nice. A very, very interesting place.
That's cool.
They do a lot of business.
So getting back to what Ari was saying, Ari, is this the blend that you're drinking right now? Is this something that you're planning on bringing to stores? Is this just in?
Yeah. So
is this an experiment?
This is a project that we were about to roll out, and then
the forces that be happened, and the world stopped.
So we pumped the brakes a little bit, but now we're ready.
Awesome.
And what it is we, in addition to scouring the country to find the best spirits the best bourbon that we can find, and the best rye that we can find for our blends and small batches and single barrels, we also work with cooperages around the country and really now around the world to source really amazing oak casks that we can do secondary finishes with. So in our barrel warehouse, we have blended bourbon put into French cognac barrels, which is French oak, very large barrels, about 500 liters, 134 gallons. We have the same bourbon put into Pinot, French oak, 350-liter barrels. So very similar barrels, but different surface area to volume ratios. So you'll get different extraction. And we're very specific about the barrels that we get. So those particular barrels, staves were harvested from the Vosges forest in France. They were seasoned outside for 36 months before the barrel was coopered. Really top-notch barrels. And then we also work with some wineries across the country, particularly in California, Cabernet and Pinot Noir wineries. And we're doing some barrel finishes with them as well. We have Jamaican rum barrels. So we finish our bourbon, all kinds of barrels at a high proof, at about 117 proof. We want to bring the blending experience to stores and bourbon groups and individuals that want their own bourbons. So what we offer is we've got all these different samples, and we're going to start offering folks to blend their own small batches with the whiskey that we've been aging in these barrels for anywhere between 6 to 18 months.
That's super awesome.
Super cool. That means that every single person that they'll blend their own whiskey, that is their unique flavor profile, the whole 9 yards, and that's theirs. And that is something that I think is really, really cool.
I only know of one other distillery that does that. And when I first heard about it, I was like, that is freaking awesome. Like you said, they're very encouraging on come in, try different stuff, try blending, get your freak on,
Yeah, I love that. As a big bourbon fan myself, I love trying new things, and that's the other bourbon guys that I always talk to. That's the bourbon community. You like trying something new. You like trying something different. Ari loves experimenting, which I love, and so he's constantly taking barrels and putting them in different types of cast finishes, different proofs, doing different things. And, I love the idea that he's able to send me samples of all these things. I can take them to a store and say, all right, let's play. And
right.
Sit down and play around, and we can mix different things, and we could do 25% cognac finish with 75% Pinot Noir finish. There's different things that we can play with, which is great. You can customize it as much as you want, or if you just really like the cognac finish, you can buy a barrel of that.
Right.
So it gives a lot of
boring.
It's like getting rid of barriers that don't need to exist between the people who are purchasing and enjoying the whiskey, the bar or in their living room, now more in their living room, these folks should have, the power to make their own whiskey and not solely rely on what's on the shelf 100% of the time.
Yeah, it's nice that, being a smaller company and pulling barrels from so many different places, it's nice because you're not just limited when you're doing a barrel pit for a store or a club. You're not just limited to, okay, here's this one mash bill, this one age, and here's your 3 or 4 samples.
Right.
You actually get to really have a big list of things to choose from and play with. So I love that. Like you said, it's cutting down the barriers.
S&G Flights wants to know, how did you guys go from wine to whiskey? Because that's a jump.
I'll start because Ari's is a little longer, I think. For me, I ran a couple of liquor stores in Memphis for a long time. So I've worked retail for 14 years in Memphis. And I started on the wine side. That was kind of where I got my knowledge to begin with. And I started, my first private label was private label wines, and going and buying single barrels of wine in California, things like that. And then as bourbon started to grow, so did me trying it, because I was running a retail store. So that's what people were wanting. That's what people were looking for. So then I started getting more and more into bourbon, and so that was how the transition happened for me. And I just went all in on bourbon.
So full disclosure, I had no idea you could buy single barrels of wine. I'm just gonna put that out there. I never knew that was a thing.
Logically, it makes sense. Like I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. But then I was like, yep, that would make logical sense. Like if you can get a single barrel of bourbon, you should be able to get a single barrel of wine. But
you don't see it much. I had to either create private labels and do those, or I went out to wine auctions out in California and would buy a barrel from somebody.
It's an amazing subculture too, because you can go out and you can buy barrels, or you can auction for the grapes. Have you ever seen a grape auction?
No. The best is there's.
They should make a reality show about those people.
I bet.
Yeah, there's even oak auctions and tree auctions, which is fascinating for the barrels.
Wow.
Like rabbit hole upon rabbit hole that you can get caught in.
Oh, man.
I'm not surprised to hear any of that with knowing I grew up in California and knowing how the wine hype is out there. I'm not surprised to hear any of that, but at the same time, I want to sit with like a bottle of bourbon and watch that and just.
So someone goes out and they auction on the tree, and then they auction on the grapes and everything, and then before you know it, you have a $500 bottle of wine, right?
Yes,
hopefully. You have a
like, shit, now I have to pay for this.
Expensive hobby. Oftentimes, I think every once in a while, someone catches lightning in a bottle, but.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you have to hope to God that no virus or mold or
floods or
worms or fruit flies or whatever eats.
Hail damage, late rain. Yeah, there's a lot.
Oxidation, acidic bacteria.
That's when you sit with your bourbon, you sit back and you watch the show.
Exactly.
So you're saying they have all this stuff over there for the wine industry, but people haven't caught on yet that single barrels is where it's at? Like,
it's
barrel blends, or
it's funny because I've started to see over the last 5 years, you've started to get now the bourbon barrel aged wines. And, I've talked to a couple of people and just said, hey, why aren't you making your labels closer to bourbon labels? Put all of the information on there. Put, every percentage, where it's coming from, every bit of information on it. People want to see that stuff, and call it a small batch. Most wine is small batch, so put that on the bottle.
and then you have to put a cool story behind it, obviously.
Well, wine guys know how to do that. So
they're in the storytelling business. There's wine involved. I had a really crappy job at the state capitol in Michigan, where I thought I wanted to be a policy analyst, and I quit after like 2 months, and I moved to France and got a job at a winery, which is how I got involved with wine. So I actually started making it. Kind of, I was into it a little bit, but when you make it, and I fell in love with making it, and then I went back for like 3 summers to learn how to make wine in southwestern France, kind of close to Spain. Not fancy, very rustic, very rural, and they had a very, what I realize now, dangerous still, an old dangerous still in the back of the winery, where the old guys would sit around and distill brandy from the fresh wine. In retrospect, I would like not go near the thing because it could have popped. It was.
We've been using it for 100 years. It's fine.
yeah, of course. So we'll live for 100 years. So I got really into winemaking, which you learn about. It's interesting. So winemakers are really into region, really into varietal.
Yep.
Things that sort of have parallels, but sort of don't in the spirits industry, right? So I came back and I came back to the States, and I connected with this guy, Dr. Chris Berglund, who is starting the distilling program. It's called Artisan Distilling program at Michigan State University, which was, I believe, the first distilling program in the country. And this was like 12 years ago. This was like about 14 years ago. So he started the program, and I was in no position with the family to like go back and get a master's degree and pay a bunch of money. But he hired me to scrub the floors. And I had background in managing wine bars at that point. I would come back from France and do wine bar stuff and be a wine purchaser. So he said, can you make me a tasting room? Can you make a tasting room for Michigan State University? So we can make spirits and then make cocktails and serve them to, like, I don't know, professors and grad students and stuff.
Awesome.
Blow the program. I said, sure. We thought it was going to take like 6 months, but it ended up taking like 5 years. And during that time, I sort of worked my way up. And the folks that were all above me got hired out to work at distilleries that we all know. So the head brandy maker over at Gallo, and then the folks that started up Death's Door, and then Santa Fe Spirits and Valentine Vodka and Dad's Hat Rye, and all these head frame spirits, all kinds of really interesting craft distilleries that would come to Michigan, hang out for like a month, and then we'd teach them how to make spirits, and we'd R&D these new products for them. Then they'd go back and start their own distillery. Did that for like half a decade with Dr. Berglund, sort of assisting him, working with clients. And we worked with some really big clients, some Fortune 500 companies that were developing spirit brands as well. And so that's how I got into it. It just so happened that I had a mentor who taught a program 45 minutes away. We hit it off really well, and then I stayed with him for a bunch of years.
Nice.
Sounds awesome.
It's crazy being down here in Tennessee, Kentucky area, and hearing about this awesome program for distillers in Michigan. I mean, I hadn't heard of that. That's crazy. I never would have thought that.
It's totally
Sounds like a place I need to go.
It was funny because we were having a lot of folks from Kentucky that wanted to learn how to make bourbon come up to Michigan in the winter to spend a month making bourbon and then go back home and do it in the traditional environment.
Right.
So yeah, it was just total right place, right time.
Well, it seems like you ended up at the right place for sure.
Well,
so sounds like a place that would be fun to learn and fun to grow, and even, hey, can I go mop their floors? I mean, what do I need to do?
Google it. First of all, Google it, right? See if it's something that you're interested in. And they have all these videos that they put online. Michigan State University Distilling Program. And you can learn about all this cool stuff.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. I should say Dr. Berglund passed away about a year and a half ago. We miss him terribly. And one of his students, Nicole Schreiner, she just got her PhD. She's on the younger side. She's taken over the program, and she's a dynamo. And so now this amazing professor of brewing and distilling is this incredibly talented young woman named Nicole Schreiner, who I think everyone who's certainly interested in this podcast is over the next couple of years going to hear her name more and more.
Nice.
Very cool.
So, question for you. How many distillers that were already distilling came up to you guys and realized that they didn't know nearly as much as they should going through the program?
So like we can all learn more, right?
Right.
So like the American distilling tradition is kind of limited. And there's not like a whole lot of, like in Scotland, there's Heriot Watt University, and they've been doing, and they work very closely with industry, and they've done so for decades and decades and decades. And so if you want to learn how to be a distiller, there's a centralized place where the information is. In the United States, there's a lot of marketing material you can read about. It says, you know, what supposedly distillers do. But I think once you start to get into the production side, you realize that, oh, that was not written by production people. So yeah, folks would come up and everyone would teach everyone, because it was like everyone had their own basis of knowledge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like when folks started distillery and maybe one person has legal background, one person was a bartender, right? One person, you know, is sort of CEO material. They all have these different perspectives. They can come together and share all their information. And we do a lot of weekend workshops up at MSU where distillers from all over the country come over, and we taste things and we learn distilling and vapor pressure in the still and all the geeky stuff. And we talk about compliance and safety and all the super important stuff like that. And I think everyone comes away learning a little bit of something. Even if you think you know a ton, if you don't learn something, that's like on you. You missed it because there was the opportunity to learn something.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm the kind of person, like, I never have assumed that I'm the smartest person in the room, or I know more than someone, or you know what I mean? Like, there's always something to learn from someone. Mm-hmm. Always. You know what I mean? Like, and I think in a lot of industries, like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Like, so S&G wants to know what sets your guys' products apart from other products.
I think it was just what we were talking about earlier. It's the idea that every distillery has its own unique flavor profile. We're taking multiple distilleries in multiple states, blending them together to create our own unique profile.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you were talking about Scotland and Ireland, like over there, it's the master blender who is the rock star. You know what I mean? The distiller is just, you know, the chemist that sits in the lab and, you know, make sure everything runs right. And then the master blender is really the one that puts everything together and actually creates what you're tasting. Mm-hmm. So I think that's
Ari's definitely a rock star.
Which of course is funny because our company was founded by an actual rock star.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, what's a name like Three Chord?
Yeah, so Three Chord also incorporates this musical theme because our company's founder, Neil Giraldo, who's a beast of a guitar player and a super amazing human being, creative force sort of in general. He is a guitar player, a songwriter, a producer. He wrote Jesse's Girl and played guitar on it, which is a massive hit. He and his wife have a band, Pat Benatar. They've sold gazillions of albums, like 40 million albums, Grammys, the whole thing. So Neil Giraldo is the real rock star, I think, involved here. And what he wanted to do, and he's been a rock and roller his whole life. In fact, he was the first guitar player ever to be shown on MTV, which is a kind of interesting historical.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was the second video ever on MTV, and the first one ever guitar player. So Neil, who's, like I said, a songwriter and a guitar player and a producer, and a film producer, and he writes screenplays. He's like,
Yeah.
It's like a river of creativity at all times.
Yeah.
One of those amazing people. We were having this talk about blending whiskey. He wanted to create a whiskey, and he and I sat down, and we were at a bar tasting a lot of different whiskeys to kind of figure out what he liked.
Right.
And we started talking, about blending and how it's really interesting. You can blend whiskeys and you can achieve characters or characteristics in your product that none of the other whiskeys on the bar have. You can make unique and compelling products.
Yep.
And if you're a blender, you also have a lot of agility where you can create new products, based on what's available. You don't have to wait, 13 years between the time for product and hitting the market. Like, if you really want something to happen, give it 6 to 9 months and we can make it happen.
Right.
So
which is a whole lot less than 6 to 8 years.
Right.
4 years minimum, hopefully.
This is where brewers have it really good. Like, brewers can do something and it can be like in a pint glass really quickly. Winemakers, some of them can make product relatively quickly, but you have to be very patient in the distilling world.
Yeah. I mean, a brewer for a beer, they sell out of a beer, it's hitting the market really well. They go, cool, we'll have some more of that next week.
Worst case scenario, you buy another fermenter and you make more of it, right?
Right.
2 shifts and double your capacity.
You don't have to go 4 years and go, shit, that was really good. We need more of that.
Right.
Now what?
That's exactly right. Which is, again, one of the benefits of being a blender. You can buy really great stuff and you can make it your own with personality. It's not COVID. I was smoking a cigar.
No, we're fine.
You're good.
Even if it was, we're okay with that too. Just keep drinking bourbon. It'll be all right.
Take bourbon, inhale.
Squish around a little bit and you'll be fine.
Neil was talking about being at the studio and working the soundboard with his fingers and trying to find the song. Like, he's got all the tracks playing and he had to find the proportions on the mixer to get the song to where it needs to be. And I was like, that is what blending whiskey is like.
Right.
And he was like, oh, I get that. Okay, let's start blending. And it was like a click. And when we said blending whiskey is just like mixing, different tracks.
Yeah.
That kickstarted it.
So have you noticed, someone wants to know, do you prefer higher proof with lower proof? Or do you try and keep similar proofs when mixing? Or
throw it all in a bot?
So the answer to that's a little bit nerdy.
Okay.
So
I'm nerdy.
We like that.
Like a minute. Okay. So
Ari can get real nerdy with you if you want.
Sweet.
So, the answer
I'm down.
If we were to have a Mr. Wizard moment here where we had like 2 minutes to do a little science project to explain what's going on.
Right.
I'd take 2 glasses, just like 2 glasses, and I'd put sugar in the 2 glasses. In one glass, I'd put water. In the other glass, I'd put high proof vodka, like 190 proof.
Right.
And if we swirled it around, what we would find after, a minute is that the glass with sugar and water, the sugar had totally dissolved. In the glass with alcohol and water, none of the sugar has dissolved. Sugar does not dissolve in high proof alcohol. Sugar does not dissolve in alcohol. Sugar is not soluble in alcohol. Go and try it.
That explains a lot, but keep going.
I mean, it's sugar and liquid, and you would think that
No,
it just dissolves.
No,
but
that makes sense. Keep going.
It doesn't
no, it
work
doesn't
with
make sense,
alcohol.
but yes, keep going.
Sugar is soluble in water.
But not
Okay.
Barrel entry proof becomes really important when it comes to extracting sugar from a barrel.
Right. And different proofs give you different flavors from a barrel.
Yes. So
That I understood, but that makes more sense with the sugar now. So
sugar is just one of the compounds that's being extracted. So
Right.
one of the sources of sweetness.
okay, I'm with you.
And it will generally be extracted at a faster rate, like a significantly faster rate, if the barrel entry proof is lower.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yep.
For a long time, whiskey went into barrels at 100, 105 proof, right? And that was the tradition.
Yeah.
And then in 1964, they said, this is crazy. We're spending way too much money on oak. We've got to raise the proof of the whiskey so we can buy fewer oak barrels, right? And that's why whiskey goes in barrels oftentimes at 125. Elsewhere in the world, oftentimes spirits go in a lot lower than 125 proof.
Yeah.
And what you find is the same spirit at a lower proof you'll get totally different extraction. So that sweetness oftentimes lends itself to the mid palate. Okay. And so, yes, we like to blend whiskeys of different proofs because oftentimes the extraction level of sugars, of tannins, of vanillin, of all kinds of compounds, they happen at different rates at different alcohol water ratios.
Yeah.
So blending at different proofs is going to allow you to have a good mid palate, side, the tannins. You're going to be able to create a fuller experience, a more full-bodied whiskey.
Awesome.
Now I want to go play chemist in my kitchen right now because that is the coolest thing ever. But
you have 190 proof at home. It's best if you have really high proof.
We have 153 that I drink regularly. It's awesome. It's a rye, but
What kind of rye is 153?
It's a Canadian rye. It's a 14-year Canadian rye.
Yeah.
14-year Canadian rye is amazing stuff.
It is.
It's dangerous.
It really is.
It's very,
Whistle
very
pig?
dangerous.
What's that?
Is it a whistle pig?
Barrel.
Barrel, okay.
Yep.
Whistle Pig's original founder is starting an Armagnac. Started an Armagnac company. We were talking about Armagnac.
Yeah.
He sold Whistle Pig and now he's got an Armagnac company.
Huh.
Which
That's cool.
Armagnac's great, so cool.
But Armagnac does have to be made in Armagnac, right? Like champagne? Like it has to be
made in that.
Or tequila?
It's a domain, right? Exactly. Or bourbon, right?
Right. As long as it's in the
United
country.
States.
Yeah.
Can you make bourbon in Guam? I don't think so.
I wondered that.
We've been questioning this for a while. Technically, I would say yes, but it's kind of like a gray area. Would you want to make bourbon in Guam is the question. Do they have seasons?
So that's another good question. Do you want seasons or do you just want heat?
Seasons.
Going by Texas whiskey, I'm going to say seasons.
It's a sweet spot in there.
There is.
There really is.
Speaking of which, I really think, Texas could benefit from using those 150 gallon barrels.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a great point. Absolutely.
But I mean, that's just me. So.
But speaking of Canadian whiskey as a total non sequitur, someone sent me a song by a singer named Tom Russell. It's a really great songwriter. And he has this song called Canadian Whiskey. And it's all about this woman and wow, she's as beautiful and as pure as Canadian whiskey. So go listen to the Canadian Whiskey song by Tom Russell at some point when you're drinking your 153 proof.
Right.
Whiskey. Like a Tennessee whiskey ripoff?
I think it was, no, I think it's pretty different. But yeah, someone should make a playlist. There should be a Spotify playlist of all the different spirit categories. Canadian whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, one bourbon, one scotch, one beer.
I am totally with you on that. So what else has Three Chord got going on? I mean, the blending program is fantastic idea. I fucking love it. I'm just going to say it. So what, for a more pedestrian, if you will, bourbon, or whiskey, what, do you guys have anything that's coming out on just mass market on the shelf?
Yeah, we've got a lot of new stuff coming. I know that, Ari, do you want to take it or?
Yeah, take it away.
Right. So I know that we have a Pinot Noir barrel finished offering that's going to be called Strange Collaboration. We're getting the barrels from the Strange Winery in California.
Awesome.
Neil is friends with the owners out there, and they created a partnership and brought Ari into it to create something cool with it. So he can tell you what all's going into that a little bit, and then we'll also have a bourbon cream coming down the line, and here sooner, I believe we'll have a 15-year-old Kentucky offering called Whiskey Drummer.
Now,
so
is that Whiskey Drummer only going to be offered in Kentucky? You said a Kentucky offering.
No, so it's distilled in Kentucky. Yeah.
Perfect.
And obviously, you can't
really
say
excited
what distillery, right?
No, unfortunately.
That's fine.
I didn't think so.
We don't need to know what distillery. Region is close enough, and
Right.
we will gladly taste, and then everyone can draw their speculations on where it came from and what.
I will say the story that I got on it was really interesting, and you really have to do some digging. And it's not a typical mash bill or a typical product that I've ever found on the shelf.
Is it a bourbon?
Yes, it is a bourbon.
Okay.
It's just
Kentucky bourbon.
It could have been a Kentucky whiskey.
Yeah,
It
Kentucky bourbon. It's just it's not the same mash bill put out by the place that it's coming from.
Sweet. That makes it even cooler.
So when you guys are going to select barrels, are you hand picking each barrel then?
So usually the way it works is that barrels come in lots. And a lot can be different sizes. It can be 12 barrels. It can be 400 barrels.
Right.
And oftentimes, just like the grapes or the trees or the wine, they work by auction. And if you really believe in a lot, then you go ahead and you bid on it, what you think is right. So the lots come in all different sizes, and yes, you taste a sample. What I've learned is that the samples that you taste when you place the bid often represent the lot, but not always. So, just like when you put your whiskey away in a barrel, your new make whiskey in a barrel, and you're not going to see it for a while. Like you're not even going to open the barrel for 4 years. And you say a little prayer as you're hammering the bung in. You do a very similar thing when you buy a lot of whiskey, where you think you know what's coming.
And you hope to God you're right.
Right. You think you know what you're going to do with it. But like we said earlier, at the end of the day, what you have to do is you have to listen. You have to taste through all the barrels and listen to the barrels. And in fact, we're about to get another sizable lot of 12 to 14-year-old Tennessee whiskey.
Nice.
And Ryan's going to come up and we'll taste through them all, and we'll talk about what the barrels are telling us to do in terms of the blend.
Ryan, swing through Nashville and pick me up on your way. Would you?
He always gets to go to the cool stuff.
So, go ahead.
I do have one question for you. So when you're saying you're tasting through the barrels, and then you let them sit, and then you revisit, and then you let them sit a little bit more, and then you revisit again, and then you kind of weed them out and figure out which ones go with which ones, and all the rest of that. How long does that process usually take?
A minimum of 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, that's not too long then. That makes. I was thinking that it could
minimum.
Well, right.
Minimum, right.
But I was thinking, are we talking months? Are we talking years? Are we talking weeks? Are we talking?
Sometimes you put those whiskeys together and then you put them in a separate cask and you wait 6 more months. So it's different each time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I know. Sorry to say they're throw their name out, but Barrel said they had a batch they were working on for like a year and a half. I mean, that's what I mean. It's crazy on one hand, but I mean, if that's what it takes to put out good whiskey, then
and to meld them.
I think they're fantastic. I think their products are really, really fantastic. And they're they're contributing to the perception that you can do cool things with blends.
I mean, for a long time, blended whiskey had this like really negative connotation behind it, and it shouldn't. there is
were some really shitty blends out there. You know,
there's also some really shitty whiskey in general that's from a single
drunk.
distillery, single barrel, whatever else. So
right, single source whiskey, and so that clouds people's visions. But if you can get rid of that prejudice and realize that through blending and through the techniques of blending and through there's a couple, and we can get into a couple of more of the techniques. You could have more interesting products oftentimes than you would get potentially from a single source product, from a product that came from a single distillery.
Yeah.
And they figured that out in Scotland, and they figured that out in Ireland, and they figured that out, you know, in France with their brandies, and we're maybe like, and we used to do a lot of that in the United States.
Right.
Prohibition. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of blending houses, right? And it went away, like a lot of things. Like our this industry's tradition really got scrapped during Prohibition, you know, from a small manufacturer's point of view.
Right.
It became very industrialized, very conglomerated, right? Very monotonous in the sense that oftentimes folks use very similar mash bills or same grain varietals, right? So Ryan and I come from a wine background where we don't refer in the wine world necessarily to like, I like red wine, right? You might actually talk about a varietal or location because a varietal or a locale that will have a specific character. Like, we're not currently in that mode in American whiskey yet.
Right.
But we are seeing a lot of, you know, our friends on the craft distiller side experiment with some really interesting varietals of grain, which I think maybe you'll see incorporated in some Three Chord products, you know, in the future.
Nice.
Awesome.
I know for a long time, if you had any kind of halfway decently aged whiskey coming from Tennessee, everyone pretty much knows it's coming from Dickel. Right. However, there's some new distilleries that's not so true anymore of, right?
It's very true. Now, Dickel makes really good booze.
They do. They have some single barrels that are fantastic.
Tennessee Distilling Company they're a young distillery, about 5 years old, but they're making really top-notch spirit.
Which one?
Tennessee Distilling in Columbia.
Okay. Yeah. They're I haven't been up there, but from what I understand, they're kind of like the MGP of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Like they just do mostly source stuff. They're doing, you know, a lot of contract distilling and
they're doing
they're doing a fantastic job.
Custom mash bills.
They're doing a lot of stuff for Costco too. Kirkland brand whiskeys.
Awesome.
That's awesome because Kirkland does not. I have a rule. If it says Kirkland on it, I'm probably going to buy it.
They generally have good stuff.
Kirkland is great value booze.
It really is.
Their vodka is premium, and you can buy it by the gallon. Like I walk out of Costco.
5-gallon bucket yet? That's really, I think, the next thing.
So someone wants to know, what is your favorite bourbon or whiskey besides Three Chord? I know people ask me that question all the time. I'm like, it depends on my mood. It depends on the night.
Yeah,
there's a lot of good stuff
There's
out
like
there.
6 or 7 bottles I probably will reach for.
So I'll be honest, I would, and this may just be because coming from the retail side, but I would rather sit and taste 10 different bourbons than sit with one bottle of something really good. Because I love trying different things, comparing different things. You know, and Kyle, I told you, I love doing them blind too. That's my geek out thing. I would love to. I love just sitting around and tasting, you know, a flight of stuff blind. It's one of my favorite things to do. But if I'm grabbing something quick, I like Woodford Double Oat. I like some of the Maker's Mark private casks, the blends that people's stores have done.
Right.
I like Bernheim. I'm still milking a couple of bottles of old Bernheim single barrel wheat that I picked years and years ago at the store I was at, and I love that stuff.
Nice.
I think they're all God's children, each and every.
I'm with you. Like,
now, Ari, I have to ask you: when you drink wine, are you going? I wonder if I added da 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 to it, that would make it taste even better.
Sometimes. it's like if you ever watch a movie with like a really annoying movie nerd,
right?
They're like, you should watch this next camera angle that's coming up. They could have done it from this other. You try to turn it off sometimes, but like you fall back into it very easily.
Right.
I would love to go drinking with you because I would love to play the mixing game because I think that kind of sums up. I hate to say it like that, but I don't ever drink just one drink per night. I'm usually drinking beer and wine and whiskey and hard liquor and then the champagne and then let's go back to the wine. And then you kind of go, I wonder if I'm going to pour it in. Let's just see. So I think that's kind of a cool and awesome way to look at any spirit. And now I want to go play chemist.
Another thing is I'm always like, we love tradition. I love tradition. Tradition, the way things have been made, certainly for the past, 60 years in Tennessee and Kentucky and Indiana, really amazing, really just like top-notch, world-class. But I am also interested in innovation. And so what a lot of the craft distillers are doing in the ways in which they're innovating, whether it's incorporating unique grains into bourbon like oats.
Right.
That'd be cool.
Right. It just, or aging in casks of different sizes or in different sorts of environments. All of that stuff is really, really interesting.
I agree.
I took Ari and the rest of the Three Chord team over to JB's Whiskey House, and Ari did a good job controlling himself and not blending everything. So
right. Cool place, though. Really cool place.
Amazing.
Very cool.
I mean,
yeah, Neil walked in, and Neil looked at me, and when we were walking up, he was like, "This is where you're taking us? Like it's a house." And we walked in, and he looked around, and he goes, "This is incredible."
Yeah, it's definitely something else. Well, guys, I definitely appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us, and let everyone know about Three Chord.
We look forward to seeing what comes out next.
I mean, like I said, this one got 94 points at the wine.
So whiskey advocate summer issue. So same score as what the digital bottled and bond got last year before it was named Whiskey of the Year.
Yeah.
So
it deserves every bit of it.
It is amazing.
It was the tied for the highest rated bourbon in this issue. So cheers to Ari. Good.
Absolutely.
Cheers
to you, sir.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really great talking to you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys.
Coming on the show.
If you guys will hang out just a minute, and everyone else, appreciate you guys coming on. You guys make all this happen, and I know you guys are excited to talk to these guys, and these guys are excited to talk to you. So anyway, until Friday, noon Central next week. Cheers.
Catch us next Friday. Drink blind.
Oh, S&G wants to know ice or no ice?
Hold up, not yet.
Typically no ice. Every once in a while I'll do 1 cube.
Usually maybe a couple drops of water, but not usually ice. But if you want ice, that's great.
All right. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.